A cult. 2 words. That's what Leon Brown called the childhood that 18 million people watched on television. Not a hard family, not a complicated one, a cult. And the strangest part isn't that Leon said it, it's who Leon refused to name while saying it. For years, we have watched this family unravel on screen, piece by piece. But this is completely different. This isn't about petty arguments over Coyote Pass or who gets what in a messy divorce. This strikes at the very core of the empire the Browns built. Before we dive into the dark reality of what really happened behind those closed doors, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to Sister Wives Crew. We bring you the deepest dives and the most exclusive theories that you won't find anywhere else on the internet. So make sure you're subscribed right now so you never miss an update. Now, let's talk about whose name Leon refused to say, because that intentional silence speaks louder than any explosive tell-all book ever could. To understand the gravity of this situation, you have to remember who Leon is. We are talking about Meri's only child, a child raised almost entirely on camera, thrust into the spotlight to serve a very specific, highly manicured narrative. The whole premise of Sister Wives was a grand attempt to show America that polygamy wasn't some dark, oppressive system. They wanted to prove they were just a normal, loving family, just with more moms. And for a long time, the audience absolutely bought it. We consumed their lives as entertainment. But for the better part of a decade, Leon has been publicly silent. They stepped away from the cameras, stepped away from the endless family drama, and practically vanished from the public eye. If you go back and watch the later seasons, that absence is glaring if you know where to look. While the rest of the family was constantly bickering for airtime and trying to secure their television paychecks, Leon chose silence. But silence isn't an absence of a story. Sometimes, it's just someone waiting out the storm until the time is exactly right to speak. That time finally came. On May 29, 2026, the very first signal reached the public. It started as a subtle shift, a message making the rounds in social media circles and exclusive fan theories. Leon indicated that it was finally time to tell their own story, completely. The crazy part? Almost nobody treated it as front-page news at first. People thought it was just going to be another generic update about finding themselves or moving on from the reality TV world. No one could have predicted the absolute bombshell that was about to be dropped. Because when you grow up with million-dollar cameras documenting your awkward teenage years, your family vacations, and your most private, vulnerable moments, reclaiming your own narrative is a dangerous game. It threatens the entire foundation of the show. The irony here is incredible. The network built a show to prove they weren't a cult, and now the very child they used as a prop is tearing that defense to the ground. Before I go any further into the timeline of how this exploded, I want your gut answer. I really want you to stop and think about this for a second. Leon grew up on camera. Millions of hours of footage exist of this family playing happy for the world. And Leon is out here saying it was a cult. So, do you believe Leon's version, or do you believe the version the camera sold you for 14 seasons? You watched both unfold. You saw the smiles, the forced family meetings, the dramatic couch confessions designed to pull at your heartstrings. But you also see the aftermath. You are allowed to only pick one. You either believe the heavily edited reality TV narrative designed to make millions of dollars, or you believe the child who actually had to survive inside that house. The contradiction here is what makes this so fascinating. The trap that the Brown family set for themselves is finally snapping shut. For years, the adults in this family cashed massive checks based on the idea that they were providing a loving, enriched environment for their kids. They built their entire credibility on being the modern, progressive polygamists. But how do you maintain that credibility when one of the very children you used to sell that wholesome image comes forward and uses the word cult? It creates a massive double bind for the audience and the network. If the network acknowledges Leon's claims, they are essentially admitting they funded and broadcasted a deeply toxic environment for over a decade. If they ignore it, they look complicit in silencing someone who is finally trying to speak their truth. For 10 long years, Leon never sat for a solo interview. No explosive magazine covers, no tearful sit-downs with daytime talk show hosts. Just a quiet, deliberate distance. And in that distance, rumors started to swirl. Reports claimed that behind the scenes, the pressure to conform to the family's rigid religious and television standards was suffocating. Some exclusive theories suggest that the camera crew wasn't just there to document life, they were there to enforce the family's image. It's been said that whenever someone stepped out of line, the narrative would be aggressively twisted in the editing room to protect the patriarch. Leon saw this happening firsthand. Leon lived it, and that is exactly why the recent events have sent absolute shockwaves through the Sister Wives universe. It's been heavily speculated that when you finally break free from a controlling environment, the hardest part isn't leaving. It's realizing that the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones keeping you trapped. The stakes here are astronomical. We aren't just talking about hurt feelings or family disagreements anymore. We are talking about the potential financial and professional ruin of a massive reality TV empire. If what Leon is saying gains enough traction, it completely invalidates the entire premise of the show from day one. It turns 14 seasons of lighthearted entertainment into a disturbing documentary of manipulation and control. And yet, amidst all this chaos, there is that one glaring, unavoidable detail: the missing name. The person Leon went out of their way to protect, even while burning the rest of the house down. You have to ask yourself why. When you are finally ready to expose the truth, when you finally drop a word as heavy as cult, why do you suddenly hold back? What is so powerful about this specific person that it stops Leon in their tracks? Think about the profound isolation that comes with this realization. For a decade, Leon had to watch from the sidelines as the rest of the world consumed their childhood as light entertainment. Fans would obsessively dissect every single episode, debate the mom's choices, and pick sides in the endless divorces, completely missing the darker reality playing out just off camera. This isolation is the reality check that forces us to look in the mirror as an audience. We laughed at the quirky family dynamics, but rumors suggest that behind closed doors, the environment was highly controlled, deeply fearful, and designed to keep everyone perfectly in line. When you look back at those early seasons with this new context, the cracks are terrifyingly obvious. The forced smiles look a lot more like survival tactics. And that brings us right back to the central mystery. To call your entire existence a cult is a point of no return. You can't take that back. You can't issue a PR apology and sweep it under the rug. It is a knockout blow to the Brown family's legacy. But to deliver that knockout blow while intentionally shielding one specific person from the fallout, that requires a level of calculated protection that borders on tragic. And what happened next as this story broke would shock everyone. On August 4th, 2026, the real shift began. A longer, incredibly raw podcast account surfaced. This wasn't produced by the network. There were no bright studio lights, no producers prompting tears off camera, and no carefully rehearsed talking points. It was just a quiet, deliberate conversation. But what was said carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Reports claim that Leon sat down and finally mapped out the psychological architecture of the Brown family in agonizing detail. The very next day, August 5th, the specific quotes began to leak into the wider world. And that is when the word cult was officially reported for the first time. It didn't happen in a vacuum. It was a precise, calculated drop. By August 7th, the word had spread across every corner of social media, igniting an absolute firestorm in exclusive fan communities. People were frantically scrambling to cross-reference Leon's quotes with old television episodes, desperately trying to find the exact moments where the family's wholesome mask slipped. Fan forums were absolutely flooded with side-by-side comparisons of the adults' public statements versus the newly revealed, deeply disturbing reality. Then came August 8th. The story officially crossed the threshold from niche internet gossip to mainstream entertainment press. 3 days, one single word, a full global news cycle. Walk through that escalation with me, because it shows exactly how terrified the network and the family really are right now. They couldn't stop the narrative anymore. The concrete example of their failed system was now a glaring headline, and their carefully crafted credibility was disintegrating in real time. But you have to look incredibly closely at what Leon actually said during this explosive period, because the absolute genius of it is in the restraint. Leon didn't come out swinging with wild, unhinged accusations or exaggerated reality show drama. Instead, the descriptions of that famous, highly publicized childhood were chillingly grounded. Leon used phrases like really shy and described feeling fearful, Think about the immense weight of that for a second. Fearful. When a reality star wants to sell a tell-all book or extend their 15 minutes of fading fame, they usually use explosive buzzwords to grab cheap headlines. They talk about epic betrayals, violent screaming matches, and dramatic table-flipping exits. But Leon didn't do any of that. There was absolutely no embellishment. Exactly those words were used. Really shy, fearful, and that quiet, unflinching honesty is the ultimate knockout blow. It forces the audience to confront a deeply uncomfortable behavioral flaw in the adults who ran that household. The parents spent 14 long seasons begging the public to believe they were building a confident, empowered, and deeply connected family. They made endless emotional appeals to the cameras, crying on the interview couch about how much they sacrificed for their children's ultimate happiness. But it was all a completely failed emotional appeal. It was glaringly inauthentic. Because while the adults were cashing massive checks on their supposed parental triumphs, the children were quietly surviving in a state of constant, low-grade terror. The jarring contrast between the confident, boisterous family we saw on our screens and the fearful, shy reality Leon just described is the ultimate thematic hypocrisy. It proves that the entire core moral of their massive television empire was built on a crumbling foundation of sand. Let's take a deep dive into the psychology of what it actually means to grow up like this, because exclusive theories have been circulating for years about the unseen, lasting damage caused by this specific type of broadcast upbringing. Imagine being a vulnerable teenager and realizing that your entire family's financial survival depends completely on your ability to play along with a scripted narrative. If you act out, if you show real emotional distress, or if you dare to rebel against the strict religious and patriarchal structures, you aren't just getting grounded like a normal kid, you are directly jeopardizing the lucrative television contract. You are threatening the very roof over your family's head. That is a terrifying, paralyzing burden to place on a child's shoulders. Rumors suggest that the pressure behind the scenes was absolutely immense, a constant, crushing demand for absolute perfection at all times. This wasn't just a strict household. It was a highly monitored, financially motivated compound, desperately disguised as a quirky suburban family. When Leon calls it a cult, it's not just a casual insult thrown out for quick shock value. It's a literal, clinical description of an environment where independent thought was seen as an active, dangerous threat to the collective survival of the group. Fans have been theorizing for years that the sudden cross-country moves, the forced, chaotic family gatherings, and the relentless, obsessive focus on the patriarch's every need were classic control tactics designed to keep everyone disoriented and completely dependent. And now, someone from the absolute inside is confirming those exact theories. The isolation that comes from living in that kind of suppressed environment is profound. You are completely surrounded by people constantly. Dozens of siblings, multiple mothers, camera crews, invasive producers, and yet you are entirely, hopelessly alone. Because if you speak the truth about what is actually happening, the whole fragile system collapses. And you are the one blamed for the financial ruin. But right here, right in the middle of all this unprecedented honesty and intense global media attention, I need you to notice what hasn't happened yet. Leon hasn't named a single person. In all the leaked podcast audio, in all the breaking reports, in the entire 3-day mainstream media explosion, specific names are aggressively, intentionally avoided. Let's build the list of who gets mentioned and who gets circled. The patriarch, obviously, is a massive, looming shadow over the entire conversation. Leon has never been shy about distancing from his overbearing, patriarchal dominance in the past. His presence in the narrative is completely unavoidable. He is the undisputed architect of the oppressive system. The other wives, Robin, Christine, Janelle, they get alluded to in various, subtle ways. They represent the rigid structure, the complicit adults who kept the wheels turning and enforced the strict rules. You can hear Leon constantly circling around their roles, acknowledging the toxic environment they all helped maintain for the sake of the cameras. But there is a massive, gaping hole in the story. A silence so incredibly loud, it practically echoes through every single quote released to the press. When you go through the transcripts and meticulously piece together the timeline of what was exactly said, you realize that this glaring omission is not an accident. It is a surgical, deliberate choice. It's a point of no return in understanding the real, deeply hidden dynamics at play. Why would someone be so brutally honest about the trauma, the pervasive fear, and the undeniable cult-like atmosphere, but actively refuse to point the finger at the one person who was supposed to be their primary protector? There's been a massive amount of buzz online about this exact detail, with fans speculating that this targeted silence is actually the most telling piece of evidence we currently have. If Leon were just out for blind revenge, absolutely no one would be spared. Every single adult in that family would be named, shamed, and dragged through the mud for the world to see, completely exposing every single dark secret they tried to bury in the desert.
But that isn't what is happening here. This isn't a careless, explosive destruction of the family tree.
This is a highly calculated disclosure designed to do maximum damage to the overarching system while fiercely shielding one specific piece of it. The most glaring thematic hypocrisy of the Sister Wives universe is that it constantly, relentlessly preached the paramount importance of maternal bonds. The show spent years highlighting how each mother had a unique, unbreakable connection with her biological children, while also supposedly acting as a loving, equal mother to all the others. But when the reality of the situation is finally exposed to the harsh light of day, we see exactly how fragile and conditional those bonds truly were under the crushing weight of the cameras and the restrictive religious doctrines. To publicly call your upbringing a cult is to completely and totally invalidate the parenting you received. It means the people who raised you fundamentally failed to protect you from severe, lasting psychological harm. And when you are the only biological child of one of those specific mothers, the dynamic becomes incredibly concentrated.
There are no biological siblings in your immediate household to hide behind.
There is no one else to share the heavy burden of that specific mother-child relationship. You carry the entire weight of it yourself, completely isolated from the rest of the sprawling brood. Reports claim that behind closed doors, this specific dynamic was fraught with a desperate, suffocating need for public validation. The adults were so desperate to secure their precarious place in the family hierarchy and secure their lucrative television spots that they allegedly lost sight of the actual emotional well-being of the kids they were openly using as props.
This is the ultimate, inescapable trap the Brown family built for themselves.
They created an environment where love and acceptance were highly conditional, based entirely on strict compliance with the patriarch's vision and the television network's endless demands for good ratings. And now, the credibility dilemma is tearing them apart from the inside out. They cannot publicly refute Leon's devastating claims without looking like manipulative monsters. But they absolutely cannot agree with them without admitting their entire life's work, their entire public persona, was a deeply destructive lie. The financial stakes are escalating by the hour as disgusted viewers threaten to boycott reruns and cancel their long-standing support for the family's various business ventures. This isn't just a bump in the road. It is a catastrophic, unrecoverable collapse of a carefully curated brand. Every single time Leon speaks, the foundation cracks a little more.
But that missing name remains the absolute key to the entire puzzle.
The behavioral flaw of the family was forcing total silence. And now Leon is using a very different kind of silence to send an earth-shattering message. This isn't the silence of someone who is afraid anymore. This is the silence of someone who holds absolutely all the cards. The audience is unconsciously hunting for that name, obsessively sifting through the wreckage of 14 seasons to find the exact moment the trust was irreparably broken. And as we move into the final layer of this explosive exposé, the truth behind that specific, targeted silence reveals a reality far more heartbreaking than any scripted television drama could ever produce. Because when you finally realize who Leon is protecting, and more importantly, why they are protecting them, it changes absolutely everything you thought you knew about this family. And what happens next is the final nail in the coffin.
The silence has a name, and that name is Meri Brown.
After all the circling, after all the careful dismantling of the patriarchal structure, and the chilling descriptions of a fear-based childhood, Leon's own biological mother is the one person entirely shielded from the fallout. The silence surrounding Meri is so absolute, so heavy, that it completely changes the entire context of the confession. When a child comes forward to publicly label their entire upbringing a cult, you naturally expect a total scorched earth approach. You expect them to hold every single adult accountable for the environment they created. But when that same child absolutely refuses to speak their mother's name in the midst of that destruction, that isn't anger. That isn't resentment. That is fiercely calculated protection. It is a protective shield thrown over the one person Leon knows cannot survive the public crossfire. To really grasp why this is happening, you have to look at the brutal reality of Meri's profound isolation within that family. This brings us to the ultimate reality check for the audience. For years, we watched Meri become the ultimate outsider in her own plural marriage. We saw her relegated to massive, empty rental houses, pacing the floors alone while the rest of the family filmed their chaotic, seemingly happy gatherings across town. She was the first wife, the foundational building block of the entire Brown family empire, and yet she was slowly, systematically erased from the inner circle. Fan forums have pointed out for years that the emotional abandonment she suffered on camera was incredibly dark to witness. The network packaged it as dramatic tension for ratings, but rumors suggest that behind the scenes, the psychological toll was devastating. Leon didn't just watch this happen on television like the rest of us. Leon lived inside that empty house. Leon watched their mother get stripped of her power, her confidence, and her standing within the family hierarchy, all while being forced to smile for the cameras and pretend everything was perfectly fine. When you grow up watching your mother endure that kind of systemic emotional isolation, it changes you. Exclusive theories claim that Leon recognized very early on that Meri wasn't just an enforcer of the family's strict rules, she was also one of its biggest victims. In highly controlled environments, the lines between the people running the system and the people trapped by it become incredibly blurred. The patriarch held the absolute power, and the wives were essentially forced to compete for his scraps of affection and the network's screen time. It is a terrifying, impossible double bind. Meri was complicit in building the cage, yes, but she was also locked inside of it right alongside her child. There's been a lot of buzz online that Leon's silence is a direct acknowledgement of that tragic duality. To name Meri in these explosive allegations would be to throw a drowning woman a concrete block. It would invite the entire world to tear apart a woman who has already been broken down by decades of public humiliation and private despair. This is the point of no return for the Sister Wives empire. The realization that this entire television dynasty was built on the silent suffering of its most vulnerable members is a completely unrecoverable blow. You can survive a messy divorce scandal. You can survive petty arguments over real estate and family budgets. Reality TV thrives on that kind of superficial drama. But you absolutely cannot survive a credible, inside account that labels your entire family structure a cult, especially when it comes from the child who was supposed to be your greatest success story. The brand is entirely dead in the water. The legacy is ruined. Every single episode that currently sits on streaming platforms now plays like a dark psychological thriller rather than a lighthearted family documentary. The adults who cashed those massive checks and sold their wholesome image to the world are now facing the ultimate consequences of their actions. The trap they set for themselves has finally closed, and there is absolutely no way out. Reports claim that the network is in an absolute panic behind closed doors. They are desperately trying to figure out how to navigate a situation where the foundational premise of their show has been exposed as a highly monitored, financially motivated compound. If they try to film another season and pretend this massive controversy doesn't exist, they will look entirely complicit in hiding the truth. If they address it, they have to admit that they funded and broadcasted a deeply toxic environment for over a decade. It's the ultimate credibility dilemma, and it is destroying them from the inside out. But no matter what the network does, or what the patriarch tries to spin in the press, they cannot change the fact that the narrative no longer belongs to them. Leon has taken the power back. By speaking exactly the truth, using words like fearful and really shy, without any exaggerated embellishment, Leon has completely dismantled the family's carefully crafted armor. This reading of Leon's targeted silence is the most reasonable one available. It connects the dots between the terrifying cult allegations and the glaring omissions in the story. It explains why someone so ready to burn the system down would stop just short of throwing their own mother into the flames. But it is still just a reading.
It is a theory built on the ashes of 14 seasons of reality television, pieced together from leaked podcast audio, carefully worded statements, and the glaring, undeniable evidence of what we all witnessed on our screens. The truth is, we may never know the full extent of what happened behind those closed doors. The darkness of that environment might be too heavy for the public to ever fully consume, but the pieces we do have paint a picture so disturbing, so entirely contradictory to the happy family image they sold us, that it forces us to question everything we ever thought we knew about the reality television industry as a whole. The behavioral flaw of the Brown family was believing they could control the narrative forever. They believed that as long as they kept smiling, kept cashing the checks, and kept repeating their scripted lines about the beauty of plural marriage, the world would never see the cracks in the foundation. But they severely underestimated the children they raised in that environment. They underestimated the human spirit's desperate need for truth and liberation. Leon's refusal to play the game anymore is the ultimate act of rebellion. It is a quiet, devastating dismantling of a machine that was designed to consume them. And by leaving Meri's name entirely out of the crossfire, Leon has proven that even in the darkest, most manipulative environments, genuine love and protective instinct can still survive. It's a tragic, beautiful twist in a story that has been defined by selfishness and control for far too long. The silence isn't just a missing piece of the puzzle. It is the loudest, most powerful statement of them all. I've laid out exactly why I think the absolute silence around one specific name is the loudest, most devastating part of this entire controversy. I really believe this intentional protection of Meri Brown is the key to understanding the dark reality of what actually went down in that house. But listen, I could be completely wrong about this, so I want you to do this right now. Don't just agree with me, come find the massive hole in my theory. If you can name a better, more logical reason why Leon stopped short of naming their own mother while calling their entire childhood a cult, I want to hear it. Drop your best theories in the comments section below and make me rewrite this entire narrative. And if this deep dive made you look at the Brown family completely differently, you need to hit that like button and subscribe to Sister Wives Crew right now. We are the only channel bringing you these intense breakdowns. And trust me, you do not want to miss what we are exposing next. Subscribe now, join the crew, and I will see you in the next deep dive.